To start the pants, the pants are actually pretty easy. There's like a few hard things. The waistband can be a little difficult, and the fly zipper is a little difficult. But we're gonna do all the easy stuff first, and then we'll do the fly. I'm gonna do a sample with you guys like midway through class today, and then you can put it in, and then we'll do like the finishing stuff at the end. But the first thing you're gonna do, just like anything, you're gonna go around and make sure you have your darts sewn. So you know, just like normal, I'm gonna just do the whole thing with you guys. So the darts are only on the back on your pants. We don't have any darts on the front. So just 2 of them. Make sure you've marked them, of course, and pin into the legs as usual. And like I said, depending on how you want these pants to fit, these pants pattern I had you guys buy has 1-inch seam allowance on certain seams. So I'm sewing everything with 1/2 inch, and you're welcome to do the 1 inch if you want, but if you want to just kind of stick with how I'm doing everything, go ahead and do it at 1/2 inch. It's kind of up to you and how you want it to fit, but if you bought the pattern to fit you, you should pay attention to what the seam allowance is on different seams for this particular pattern. They leave 1 inch seam allowance so that you guys can, so the sewer can adjust the fit of the pant in a more efficient way. It has more space for alterations. So we're going to do our darts on the back first, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to have to put our angled side pocket into the front pieces, because we can't do our side seams before we do our pockets, right? Because remember, the angled side pocket continues up into the hip curve of the pant. And so in order to complete that pattern piece, we actually have to put the pocket in. This angled side pocket on this pattern piece is essentially the exact same thing as what we had done for our sample. So you guys should have done your samples already, so you should know exactly what to do, but I'm going to still review it. So you can set aside your back pieces all done. You press those darts again towards the center, and then you're going to open up your front pattern piece. Now make sure that you open them up and spread them on the table so that they are opposite, right? Because when we're doing pants legs, just like when we're doing sleeves, we want to make sure that they're mirror images. If you do the same, if you accidentally sew them the same way, you will not be able to put the pants together. One side will have to be inside out. So make sure as you're going that you're double checking that. I'm going to set aside the side pocket, the actual facing of the pocket, and just do the lining. And remember, we're going to line up this diagonal line, and there's a notch on that line with our pattern piece where there's a diagonal line and that notch matches up. And we're going to do right sides together. And so if you're using actual fabric, you would want to make sure that this is on your right side, because we're going to flip this around. We're going to sew at 1/2 inch here. Now, again, careful with your seam allowance. This wouldn't be a 1 inch seam allowance, so really pay attention if you're going to be doing that 1 inch seam allowance, that you're paying attention to what the pattern actually says. Go all the way back stitch both top and bottom. And then we're going to press all this away, and we're going to understitch. Remember, understitching is stitching the seam allowance to the facing at 1/8 of an inch from the seam. And this would be better if you pressed it, just expediting. And again, I think I mentioned this when we did the sample. Understitching on the pocket is not absolutely necessary, but I like to do it because it really keeps it from rolling in. And then I'm going to press that nice crisp edge down. Okay, so I'm going to do that to each side. I like to do kind of one thing at a time here. Thank you. Again, understitching on the facing side, sewing that facing to the seam allowance that you just sewed at 1/8 inch top stitch. And remember that understitching always wants to be on the facing side, because that's the side that you don't see. It's not the garment side. So it's going to get hidden inside the pocket. And again, I'm going to press this in so this is a nice, clean, crisp edge. We're going to pretend that And then flip these over again and then double check again. So now we're working on the inside of the garment. Just double check that they're mirror images. If they're not, now is a good time to notice and change that. We're then going to take our pattern piece for the pocket facing, which is going to fill out this little triangle that's missing on our hip. And you're going to match up your notches on your pocket and the shape of the pocket and make sure everything is nice and flat. And you're first going to sew the pocket to the pocket. So you're going to sew around this curve first. Just make sure everything's lined up. If it's not, what's going to happen is this space, which is completing your waistline, is going to move. And if that moves, it's going to change the measurement of the waistline. We don't want to do that. There's also a notch right there. You'll see that that notch is lining up exactly with that line of where the pocket is. If that's not happening, then you have something to check, okay? So I can flip this out. And I'm only going to go around the curved part. I'm not going to do the straight side because that's actually going to get sewn into the pant itself. And here we can do a 1/2 inch also. Just on that curve. Flip that back again to our right side. And you'll see, again, that notch is matching up. And we just want to make sure that our waistline is nice and straight. And again, there's another notch that sort of shows you where that pocket is ending as well. Make sure those line up. And then down here, we want to make sure that the side seam and the hip line right there is matching up, and that our pocket line lays flat. And this would lay nice and smooth if it was pressed as well. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a row of stay stitching here and a row of stay stitching just on the area where that pocket is. For the waistline, you can go all the way across if you want. And stay stitching again within that 1/2 inch seam allowance on the waistline. And that kind of solidifies where the pocket's going to stay. And then again, like I said, just down here where that pocket is going over the side seam. So within that seam allowance, remember, not more than that 1/2 inch because you don't want to see it. About 1/4 of an inch or a little bit more. And now we're ready to start sewing our front to the back. So let me do this again. I'll show you one more time on this side because you got to do it twice. Again, lining up the curve of the pocket, and there are notches as well. So notches here on the pocket itself, a notch here to show you that that's meeting up with that. And then I'm going to sew my curves together.
I'm going to show you.
I think everybody thinks pants are kind of hard because they seem like hard to understand how they're actually made, but pants are, I think, simpler than the shirt. There's a lot less steps and add-ons. I think the worst part is probably, like I said, the fly. But the fly's not so bad if you just take it one step at a time. Everything's not so bad if you take it one step at a time. So again, we flip it over to the right side. Make sure everything is lining up nice and flat. We don't want anything to be pulling here because then it's going to pull on our actual line of the pant. We really don't want that to happen. So again, stay stitching across the waistline. And that's all going to get caught into the seam allowance for the side seam and eventually the waistband as well. So we don't have to worry about what that looks like. It's going to get caught into seam. So again, we're double checking that we have a front and a back. And then we're going to go ahead and put our back pieces and make sure it's right side to right side. So your little dart should be on the outside. And these little curves should line up. There is going to be extra here. It's okay, don't freak out. These lines don't match up perfectly. The only lines that should match up perfectly are your side seam and your inseam, okay? So this is the inseam and this is the outseam. We remember that from when we were measuring our bodies in the beginning of the class. And so we're going to sew, doesn't matter which one you sew first, inseam or outseam, you're going to sew both of them, but make sure that you sew front to back, not front to front, right? We want to think about the actual pattern pieces. This is where your measurements are going to be different in terms of your seam allowance if you're actually doing the pattern piece. So again, I'm sewing everything 1/2 inch. You can stay with me or you can do what the pattern says, and I believe the pattern has a 1/2 inch on the inseam and a 1 inch on the outseam, but double check and see what it says. I cut mine off, so I'm just doing 1/2 inch the whole time. You can always take it in too in terms of alterations afterwards. It's a little bit more difficult to take things out, so that's always something to keep in mind when you're sewing and using varying seam allowances. And on this outseam, you're going to use that piece that lines up, that's part of the pocket now. So you're going to go ahead and sew through all of that, but just make sure that you're matching up those curves. There are some notches down the side seam too, and definitely pin this. Again, I'm kind of expediting this process a little bit. And again, you're going to have one side be a little bit bigger. That's the back side is a slight bit bigger than the front side to make room for the body. So don't worry if you're feeling that. Just make sure that everything else is lining up. The actual shape of the lines and the length of the pants. If you have a little extra or at the end, you know, the hem, a little bit is okay. If it starts to look like more than a 1/2 inch, something is probably wrong. But sometimes, depending on your fabric, things can get a little skewed. The place that you really don't, you know, you don't want that to happen is within the crotch line. So starting at the top and sewing towards the bottom is the best way to sort of go about that. So that's one leg. I'm going to do the same thing for this leg, and then I'm going to show you how to put them together, and then you guys can go off and get to that point. So again, right sides together. Just had a moment of panic. I was like, uh-oh, did I do this wrong? I think it's easy sometimes to think about the sewing, especially pants maybe, as sort of a puzzle, you know, and these pieces have to all fit together like puzzles. And if you put two pieces, you force two pieces together that are wrong, the rest of the puzzle doesn't really look right, right? I'm going to collect it at the end of class next week. See, I don't want to collect anything on the final exam day because then I can't get it back to you guys. So I don't want to collect it that day. But do you feel like you're going to need it to study from? No, not really. You guys probably aren't really going to study very much, are you? Not because you don't want to, just because like this is kind of a weird class to study for. The best thing to do is to practice, really, you know. Okay. I would say take a look at your sample book and know the different seams and everything from the beginning. That stuff's going to be the same. It's going to be just like your midterm, essentially, with additional things about like facings and zippers, all that stuff that we sort of did. Maybe sort of the steps to putting together certain things. So it's more just remembering what we've done. Maybe review some of the videos and terminology that we had done the second part of the year. And then basic knowledge, of course, about selvage and bias and grain. And so if you have any questions about that stuff, next week will be a good week to ask about that. All right, so now this is where a fun, magical thing happens. So we now have our two pants legs, and this is where everybody gets confused. Well, how the heck do we get this curve to fit into each other? And again, this is a point you really want to double check that you have mirror images, so your fronts should be mirroring each other. What we're going to do is we're going to turn one side, right side out, and we're going to slide it inside the other one, putting right sides together. So you're going to slide it inside the inside out one, making sure that the crotch lines are matching up. So we essentially looks like we just have one leg here. We're going to again make sure those crotch lines match up, and then we're going to sew the curve, but we're not going to sew the whole curve because we have to put a zipper in and we need to get in and out of these pants. And for a fly zipper, we don't actually baste anything together in terms of the seam. So there is a little notch on your front, and you'll notice if you look at your, make sure you're looking at your front piece. It's a little notch. That's where your zipper is going to start, so that's where you're going to stop your stitch. So we're going to stitch from the back, or you can start here. I'm going to start I'll start in the back. And we have three little notches on the back side too, to kind of make it aware that that is center back seam. So I'm going to start center back seam. This may also have a 1-inch seam allowance. If you're following the pattern again, just double check. It says on the pattern. Again, I'm doing everything 1/2 inch. And you're going to sew around this back seam curve. This can be a little confusing to set up, but once you actually get it, you'll see. And again, I'm going to stop and backstitch right at that notch. All right, and that's where we're going to leave it for right now. Try and get to that point. Hold on, let's do the last magic thing. So then you turn everything right side out. And pants. Yay! Pants with pockets. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put the fly in, and then we'll put the band on. We'll see how far we get today. I'm definitely going to do the fly sample, so that's the last sample for your notebook. And then you will be doing the fly on your own. I'll probably do it twice for you. Maybe we'll see how far we get today and how exhausted